Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're just going to let a few more people join us before we get started, okay? Okay, and we are ready. So hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Susie Ho, and I'm a business development executive at Calian and the chair of the Women in Leadership Foundation, Ottawa. I would like to begin first by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and we are so truly grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. Women in Leadership has a great session in store for you today. But first, a little bit about WIL. We are a national nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing and empowering women while inspiring and developing the next generation of women leaders. We have chapters all across Canada and the US and members from all across the globe. In fact, if there's anyone here joining us today from outside the country, please say hi to us in the chat and let us know where you're from. I'm going to be monitoring the Q&A function, so please submit your questions using the Q&A box. There's going to be a lot of people online today, and I promise I'm going to do my best to get to all the questions. A quick reminder that this recording is going to be available at the end for anyone who missed it, as well as anyone who wants to rewatch it. And now it brings me great pleasure to introduce Rachna Clavero. Rachna is the Senior Director for Strategic Growth and Innovation at Kinectrics. In this role, she manages the nuclear sales portfolio for one of the largest service providers of Canada's nuclear industry. She has been building winning teams and mentoring for over 20 years. She's a confidence coach at DAWN, which stands for Driving Advancement for Women in Nuclear. And to me personally, she is a colleague, friend, and mentor who has been instrumental in my career journey. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Rachna and turn it over to her.
Thank you so much. My name is Rachna Clavero. I'm a Senior Director with Kinectrics in Strategic Growth and Innovation. I just want to start by saying I'm so honored to be here. I really, I've looked into the Women in Leadership Foundation. What an organization, what a great membership. And it's so nice to see people, putting into the chat where they're from. I just love it. Really honored to talk to you today about building relationships and credibility, but really, think about your own experiences as I'm speaking and come up with questions that are relevant to you. That's really what I'm here for. So I'm actually going to start by sharing my screen. So please do confirm that you can see it once I do this, and bear with me as I get into slide mode. Okay, are we good? Perfect. Okay, so I'll talk today about building relationships and credibility. I want to start by talking about career paths. Career paths today, they're not a straight line. And I would argue that even in the past, they weren't a straight line or a ladder, but a lot of people come into the workforce thinking that they have to go up certain rungs in a ladder to succeed. But really, career paths are influenced by many different things: personal interests, family life, work location, financial situation, education, training, your own career ambitions, and also job satisfaction. We need to think differently about career options today, and we need to become drivers. We need to drive that career and really have targeted growth. And that's what I want to touch on today in terms of how your relationships and credibility will help you. So what are the enablers to career growth? Credibility. Credibility comes from things like technical expertise, proficiency, work ethic, your skills, competency, and integrity. Your strengths. And this is something I always tell people: you have to look inside and really understand what are your strengths. Many people start looking for new career opportunities without actually recognizing where they excel in their job. Your work relationships within your company and also outside your company, and your support network. And I can't emphasize enough, that support network is not just in the workplace, but it's at home as well. And then we'll talk briefly later on about sponsors, mentors, and coaches. There's actually a difference between each of these, and there's different stages in your career where you will benefit from these. So let's talk about building relationships. So I said this to Susie once, and I think this is what caught on, but it's really not about who you know. It's about what they think about you. You can know many different people, but it's the people who, look at you in a certain way, trust your opinion, know that you're credible, and would refer you to a coworker or superior. They're the ones who are going to help you in your career. Do they respect you? Do they respect your judgment? Again, it's not about the number of contacts you have. It's about those mutually valuable connections. You have to have a quality connection, and I emphasize you have to maintain it. A lot of people think you can meet someone once, do a networking event, and then they forget about it. They'll slide those business cards into a drawer and never come back to it. That's a relationship that you could have built and developed, but didn't maintain. And most importantly, and this is why it's in bold and red, it's all about trust. When you think about the people in your personal life that you turn to, they're the ones that you trust. It's the same thing in the workplace. I also want to speak a little bit about earlier in your career, because I understand that there are many people who have joined us today who are earlier in your career. So when you don't have a lot of work experience, when you don't necessarily have the technical capability that you've been able to build up for credibility, it's about demonstrating your potential, asking questions, having a learning mindset. And I can't emphasize this enough either. Don't chase titles early in your career. Chase knowledge. Be that person who's constantly learning. Put yourself in a job where you have that opportunity to learn. So let's talk about how to grow your network strategically. What are the objectives of doing that? Well, it's to discover opportunities for both yourself and to find out how you can bring value to others. It's about understanding current trends, needs in the marketplace, needs in your own company, needs outside of your company, and how those market opportunities can tie to your career. It's about obtaining information, advice, and getting introduced to others. So when you make new contacts, ask for introductions. The best way to secure a new contact is to be introduced by someone they trust. The buddy system works. I can't emphasize that enough. Buddy system works. Leverage social media and groups on LinkedIn. I almost always, when I meet someone new, I pop onto LinkedIn, connect with them, but also just look at their profile. Go to company industry activities, clubs, events, charity campaigns. And as I said before, follow up. Keep the connection fresh, offer value on a regular basis, and keep them informed of your career changes. We often forget, going from one career to another, to take our contact list with us, but really important thing to do. These days you can often, move careers without changing phone numbers, but back in the day that wasn't the case. But emails do change. So again, it's very important to inform your network when you've had a career change. So I do want to touch briefly, as I said, on sponsor, mentor, and coach. They're useful in different ways and different stages. Most of you would have heard the term mentor. Many of you would have a mentor, which, by the way, I think is an excellent thing to do. And I would also advise, don't just have one mentor, have many different mentors for different aspects of your career. Look to people who are peers, but also people who are that maybe report to you or are in a position where they're moving up in their career. It's amazing how many people early in my career that were my peers are people who have influenced my career later on. But a sponsor is someone who advocates for you. And this is a very important role, especially as you move through different roles in your career and move up to more executive level roles. You need someone who's got a position of influence that can advocate for you. Interestingly enough, a sponsor may not be someone that you actually talk to on a regular basis. A sponsor could actually just be someone who has watched you in your career and puts their hand forward and says, she's the one who should move into that role. It's a very important role, especially later on in your career. And a coach is someone who's really going to be influential in the early stage of your career. I would say, for me personally, I always love to learn. And so for me, I have coaches at every stages of my career. But a coach is someone who empowers you. They're the ones who are experienced, they can help you target skills, and they can really deal with you on focused issues and coach you through those. So a different kind of role from a mentor. A mentor is really someone who advises you and really advises you from a selfless place. And that's really important. I would almost say that a mentor has to step away, especially if it's someone in your own workplace, but they have to step away from that role that they have. And they have to look at your career and say, this is where you should go, but based on what they think is best for you. And that's a very important role in influencing your career. So let's talk about how you broaden your views in your relationships, because it is important to step outside of your day-to-day role. So inside your company, set time aside to meet with people working in other areas, learn about other business lines, learn about things and how your company functions as a whole. Look for projects that intersect with other parts of the company and where you can be exposed to new business lines. When attending meetings, raise your hand, lean into the discussion, and ask questions. It can feel intimidating earlier in your career to ask questions. A lot of people worry about how it will look, but honestly, try to push that aside and just ask your question. I can guarantee there's someone else in the room who has the same question, whether they're 2 years in their career or 20. Look for job shadowing or secondment opportunities and ask to attend meetings as an observer. You don't always have to be the participant, but if you have something to learn, even just from observing a senior level meeting, ask to attend it. Challenge yourself, say yes to a project and work outside your comfort zone. When I look back on my career, it was all of those opportunities where I really stepped outside of my area of expertise, where I grew. And there's skills you can gain when you take that challenge that you can't get when you're in a comfortable position and where you may be considered an expert. You really do need to take that step outside of your comfort zone. And finally, outside your company, gain exposure to other organizations. Some really good things are something like women in leadership, look at associations, committees, boards. The goals here are really to get into a place where you are viewed as an equal member. It provides exposure to many organizations, volunteer for industry organizations and working group, but take advantage then of the meeting break times, the lunches, do the networking, learn about what other people are doing in their organizations. These are great avenues to kind of get that picture of the greater marketplace. And early in your career, there are still things you can do. Youth councils, alumni associations, university committees or college committees, and volunteer work. All of these are avenues to help you in your career. So how do you then take all of that and create your opportunity? So let's go back a bit. It's about knowing your strengths. What are you passionate about? What motivates you to work every day? So recognize that your career path is yours. Often people think that the people above you who are in a supervisory role, that they will determine your path. That's not true. A boss can help you, but don't expect them to chart out your path because it's yours. You need to be the one who's in that driver's seat. And oh my gosh, my biggest pet peeve, stop looking at the organization chart. So many people will put the organization chart in front of them and they'll look at the vacancies, they'll look at the positions and they'll say, oh, I think I can do this one, I can do this one. Push it aside. There are roles that can be created. And even if a role has a certain title, you're going to make it your own. And that's what's important. That's what's going to keep you motivated and moving forward. Don't go into the process with the narrow view thinking that org chart is all I can look at. Don't look at who's retiring, where the gaps will be or where the vacancies are. Really step back, know your own strengths and where you can bring value to the company. So then it's about going forward and developing a solution. Could a project benefit from involvement of other groups? Is there a group that has expanded and can benefit from a leadership position that you could move into? Would restructuring a team make it more effective? Could you be part of a succession plan for a key expert? These are the kinds of questions you have to ask when you're developing a solution. And the answer to that solution is going to be you, right? Like you're going to be the one who's going to move into that position to take on that role. So start asking questions of your coworkers, your boss, other leaders, and find out where there's a need to leverage your network. Again, it all goes back to opportunities most often happen and are created through talking to others, less so by looking at a job listing. So how do you bring it all together? We talked about knowing your strengths, we talked about building your network and broadening your industry view. So you're going to take all of those three pieces and you're going to develop your opportunity. And really taking all of that knowledge, you're going to kind of say, these are the things and the areas of interest I have. Come up with a few ideas, solutions as I called them. And then the nervous part, pitch your idea. It doesn't have to be a nervous thing, go to who you need to go to pitch your idea. Recently, I was actually interviewing someone on a panel myself, and so much respect for her. She's the chief operating officer for Ontario Power Generation. Her name's Nicole Butcher, and she used the term network your development plan. I love that. That's exactly what you're doing when you're pitching your ideas. You're networking your development plan. And be open-minded when you do it. Don't put yourself into a box. Have some solutions and ideas, but it's about generating more ideas. I can tell you in the past, I've used this approach, and almost every time I've put an idea of what the role would be on paper, when I've gone to my boss or to the person who's in charge of hiring for that role, the discussion has actually led to a much richer job description, and one that in the long run was much more fulfilling for me. And then it's about continuous learning. So pitch your ideas, move into a role, but take it back. Continue to learn and go back at different stages in your career, review your strengths because those will change over time. Review your network because that will change, and continue to broaden your view. It's about bringing all those pieces together. So that's the end of the presentation, but I'm happy to answer questions and really kind of have that chat now.
Thank you so much, Rachna. I love all of the content in that presentation. I just found that every slide, there were so many great takeaways from it. And I hope that the rest of our audience agrees and derived as much value as I did. So I want to go back to a phrase that really, when you said it to me, it resonated so much that it inspired me to approach you to speak to our audience today. And it's it's not about who you know, it's about what they think of you. That really makes you think about what you can do to make a good impression and to really get that endorsement from somebody who can, open doors for you. So I'll ask, getting an endorsement from someone that you've taken that time to build a relationship with, that's relatively easy, right? But what about someone you just meet? Is it possible to earn credibility during a first meeting? And what are the things that someone can do to leave a meaningful first impression?
It's a good question, Susie. And yes, it's definitely easy once you've built that credibility and have a relationship to have them, refer you. When you first meet someone, it's not just about making that connection. It's really about having a valuable connection, one where you have shared information and they'll remember you. And that's not always easy to do. And so you will have situations where you just meet someone and, it's a quick conversation. You do a quick here, this is who I am. And then they'll probably not remember after the conference. But one thing I do, you have to do your homework. So ahead of a meeting, even if it's a small meeting, ahead of a conference, get familiar with who's going to be there. Target who you want to meet, right? Don't go after just anybody. Really look at that list of attendees and say to yourself, okay, who are the influencers that I want to meet? And then learn about them. And this is all, you have to do all of this ahead of time, right? Learn their interests, their relation to your work, what they find valuable. And then when you meet them, really listen, right? Really listen to what they share with you in terms of interests. But some tips I can give you is, early in my career when I was meeting people for the first time, I would often listen to what they'd say, and then I'd follow up later on with an email, and I'd send them an article or a link to a report or a white paper, something that was related to our conversation. And actually, I thought in my mind would provide them with value. And it's amazing how something as small as that, not expecting anything in return, can really start that, building that trust. Because first it's about trust. So they need to know, okay, not only were you listening, but you actually took the time to find something of value and sent it to them. But don't expect them to respond. But you'll see it makes a difference. The relationship starts that way.
I really like that. I guess just really approaching it with intention and not just looking for a business card and thinking that that will equate to an opportunity. I guess, and we have a question that came up that kind of builds upon what we were just talking about whether or not you had tips on networking authentically so it doesn't come off as fake or self-serving.
Again, it's really about being the listener when you meet someone. And it's amazing. You have to also think about, what is the person going to remember? And people love to hear positive things about the people who work for them. Leaders love that, so if I'm meeting a leader and I know, or someone that works for them, they're either a colleague or maybe someone who I've interacted with, and it's been a positive experience for me, like it has to sincerely be a positive experience, then I will give them that feedback. And it's a great, like, leaders love that. There's a lot of pride in their teams. And so it's definitely one of those things that they remember. You want the person to go away feeling good about themselves, right? Feeling good about meeting you. So it's not easy to do it on one meeting, but you do have to think about, what can you say that's of value? And if you can't think of anything of value, maybe that's not the person you should be talking to, right? Like, maybe that's not the interaction you need to have. There was actually one time where I was in a situation, there was two CEOs I wanted to meet, and one of them, I didn't really have anything of value to give them. So I ended up going to the other one because it turned out just a few weeks before I had visited one of the utilities that they worked at, and everyone who was at that utility remembered him and said positive things. So I was able to, go to him, introduce myself and say, hey, through this leadership course, I was at your utility last week. And I didn't even finish my sentence, and his eyes just, opened up because I made that connection. And he was just talking on and on because he had such a good experience at that utility. And so, I'm pretty sure he still remembers me just because of that conversation.
I love that. I think my takeaway from your experience is a great icebreaker is allowing that person the opportunity to talk about themselves.
Yes. Again, but be the listener.
I do have a question that came in, Rachna, and it's one that has come up, a theme that's come up during the pandemic. And I'll just read it verbatim. There's an advantage to young women in the hiring process as they are seen current and innovative, but how does a seasoned employee break the barrier of being seen? Did I read that right? Being seen is not,
being seen is not current. Yeah. So I think, to paraphrase, how does a seasoned employee break the barrier of not being seen as not innovative, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it's a good question. Innovation is one of those buzzwords right now, but really innovating, it just means thinking differently, taking something and thinking differently, and it's about changing perspectives. It's about attempting things from a different angle. I think seasoned employees can definitely break the barriers, and it's all about giving examples of where you have been innovative in your career. And sometimes it's the littlest thing where you have actually done something different, right? What are some of those continuous improvement initiatives that you've put in place in your workplace? How have you taken a problem and looked at it in a different light? I think, I'm in an industry where, technical expertise is really extremely important. And I think the challenge almost becomes the other way around for young women, where early in their careers, they struggle to build credibility. But I would say, yes, we definitely look at our new graduates and we say, hey, we want you to come in, be innovative, think differently. But yeah, I think as a seasoned employee, you actually have tangible examples, and that's the difference. And that's what will set you apart from someone who's young.
Right. No, I fully agree. That's great advice. We've been talking lots about networking, and you had mentioned earlier on in your presentation concept of networking strategically. I remember, being young and going out to those networking events, coming home with a stack of business cards and being like, I did good. Like this night was a huge success. And you were right. I put them away and I never reached out. I never built those relationships. So you talk about networking strategically. Can you just unpack that idea a little bit more for us?
Sure.
What does it mean to network strategically?
So, it's really about understanding who you need in your network. And of course, it has to go back to understanding your strengths and what you want, right? So you start there. What are your strengths and what do you want? And then figure out who are going to be the influencers and who's going to have an impact on your career. Now, of course, when you're going to events, you may not all be thinking directly about your own career, right? It may be something that you're working on. But again, think about who are the influencers and the decision makers, and make that list and keep it small. Like, honestly, I don't target more than 3 people in an hour, right? Like I will target 3 specific people that I want to meet in an hour, because that's roughly 15 to 20 minutes per person, right? And to have a meaningful conversation and come away knowing that you've made a connection. That's what I target. I wouldn't target more than that. I can guarantee your stack of cards is just sitting somewhere. Like I have a Rolodex, which I'm very proud of, by the way, but even I have those stacks that you pick up. Now, the one thing I do with those cards, and people are going to think I'm really old now, but I do actually write on the back of business cards as soon as I meet someone, because if you're listening, you're going to right away, you're going to have a few tidbits of what was their interest areas. So just write it on the back of the business card. It's kind of the easiest thing to do. But, people do tend to gravitate towards senior executives, CEOs, and they think those are the influencers. But you have to remember, at different stages in your career, different people are the ones who are going to impact it. When you're early in your career, a CEO is not actually going to be the one who pulls you up, into different roles. It'll be your peers, through peer feedback. And it will also be your immediate, direct supervisors or managers. And so they're actually the ones who are going to have more influence. And there are some people who influence wherever they are, like whatever title they hold, right? And those are phenomenal people because, they may get you early in your career, and they may still have the ability later in your career to say, oh, she should go into that VP role. And those connections are really invaluable. And it's, to me, in some cases, it's almost more important than the CEO connection.
Do you hear that, everybody? Don't waste your time.
I didn't say that.
CEO, schmooze everyone who reports up to them.
Yeah. Oh, there's going to be CEOs that are mad with me now.
Like, why isn't anybody asking for my business card?
I think they'll be happy that I've given them a bit of a break, but.
One of the reasons why I met you is because you're so adamant about being generous with your time. I'm reading this beautiful book. It's called Give and Take by Adam Grant. And he is, he's a social scientist in organizational behavior. In this book, he defines givers as those who constantly and unconditionally help others, even if it's a setback for themselves. Matchers are those who just give with the expectation of reciprocity, and then takers, as the name suggests, are those who just, they're out for their own self-interest. In his research, surprisingly enough, he reveals that the most successful people and the ones with the most powerful networks are the givers. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts on this are, and if you think there's any merit to trying to grow your network by being a giver.
Absolutely. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. I'm not surprised that that's the conclusion that Adam Grant came with. But, and the reason for that is it goes back to building trust and credibility, right? When you think about people that you go to for advice in your personal life, It's the people who give their advice to you freely, the ones who you know don't want anything from you. Those are the people that you trust. It's the same thing in the workplace, right? When you when you are a person who's focusing on building other people up, helping others, helping build leaders, then you're naturally, instinctively just building those trusting relationships. People will go to you, and your network just grows that way. It's funny, for as much as, I talk about the effort that you have to make, and you do have to make an effort when you're building a network, but a lot of it does just happen naturally. When people get to know you, if you're somebody that is a giver, they'll tell others, hey, you know what, go call Susie. She helped me the other day. Maybe she can help you. Like, that's the way it happens. And so it's no surprise that givers are able to build stronger networks, because it all comes down to the trust.
That's great. Thanks, Rachna. I have a question from Renee, who asks, how does one network effectively in remote offices? She's been in one for 20 years.
20 years. Oh,
hasn't figured that out.
Wow, you've got to have some in-person meetings. You know what? It's interesting. I think going through what we've gone through in the last 2 years, I actually think that we have become better at networking now effectively in a remote world. Even right now, just I can see Susie's body language. I can, see her facial expression, and I know she's enjoying this, right? But I don't, I won't say that it's easy. I think, to really build those true relationships where the person's going to reach out to you, it is something that you have to do in person. Remotely, it's about, you do need to use your video. You do need to make, reach out based on their time. Like, I don't know if you're dealing with different time differences and in different countries, but definitely, you've really got to have that one-to-one conversation. I would encourage you, when you're doing something remotely, there's only so much you can do in the network or a relationship in a meeting when there's multiple people. So that's where you do need to have the one-to-one meetings via video to really make those effective and build some relationships.
Yes, Renee, my heart goes out to you. I couldn't imagine having lived this for 20 years, but I invite you to reach out to organizations like Women in Leadership. The world's opening back up, and we're going to be happy to host in-person events. If you're here in Ottawa, then you'll have to come out to our first wine mixer. Gosh, I wanted to go back to a powerful stat that you had mentioned in your presentation. 80% of jobs are filled through personal and professional connections. That's huge. Given that, would you say that it's totally acceptable and appropriate to reach within your network and ask them to help you navigate your job search?
Yes. So, I mean, the short answer is yes, but you do have to be strategic about it, right? There's a lot of different scenarios when you're doing a job search. If you're someone that isn't in a role right now, absolutely, take advantage of your network, know who are the people who are going to reference you, promote you, and help you. Take full advantage. Now, if you're somebody who's in a role, in a job, and you've decided that it's time for you to move on or to leave, you do need to use discretion. And something I do want to say is, don't leave the job until you've left. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people, they get disgruntled, they decide they want to move on. Mentally, they're no longer, in the role. And they get to a point where they say, you know what, I'm just going to reach out to my whole network. If my boss finds out I'm looking, it doesn't matter. But you know what? It does matter. It really does matter, because your reputation is not only built on the jobs that you go to, but it's built on the jobs you leave, right? Don't burn bridges, and don't create a situation in the company that you want to leave where you've mentally left and they still need you and they're still depending on you. It also reduces your credibility in that company quite a bit before you've even left and before you've had a job secured. So again, be strategic and use discretion.
And potentially even losing your credibility outside of that organization if you have
Absolutely.
that transition
Yeah,
thoughtfully. No, that's
absolutely.
really great. So we have a question from an anonymous attendee, which actually reminds me of something personal, a personal story about how we even met in the first place, Rachna. I remember exactly what inspired me to reach out to you. You were giving a talk and you had mentioned, you'd shared that you were a mother of 4 kids. And I had just given birth to my daughter, and I was feeling super unsettled because I was, going on parental leave, but I had just reached a point, I positioned myself in my career where I thought it was just taking off. And so I love my daughter, but I was just feeling unsettled, I guess, as I'm sure a lot of women can relate. And you had said something to me, which was one of the most important pieces of career advice I've ever been given. Do you remember what that was? And would you mind sharing that?
I do, Susie. And, thanks for bringing up, because it's such a personal thing for me as well. It was career advice I was given early in my career, and I really appreciate it. So I do have 4 children. I love being a mom of 4, and it defines who I am today. But, we all go through struggles, and unfortunately, a lot of the decisions around careers land on the woman when there's, a child or a family's expanded. I wish I could say that it was equal and that men go through the parent guilt and go through what do I do? Do I take a year off? Do I not? But majority of the time it's still with the woman. And so, I've been there too. And, I with 4 children, I was probably, at the point in my career where things were starting to move, because your first few years you're just learning. Things were starting to move, and it was hard for me because I was getting good opportunities come my way. And one of my mentors, he said to me, he said, Rachna, he said, there's no race to the top in your career. He said, good people will get to where they want to get to. Um, you know, take the time, spend it with your children, because you'll never get that time. There will always be a manager role. There will always be a VP role. There will always be a CEO role, but your kids are only young ones. And, the other thing I think, and so that really hit home with me, especially the comment that good people will get to where they want to get to. And years later, when I got into the deputy CEO role for the one that I had just before my current role, he came to visit me, and I remember him looking at me and saying, see what I mean? And I loved that. It's such a 360 moment for me. But, another short story I'll share. I remember early in my career, or actually it was early in her career. So a colleague of mine, it was early in her career. I worked with her for a few years on a project, and it was a demanding project. And she had only been working for maybe 3 or 4 years. Very good technically, but my goodness, I was so impressed with her on this project. And, she left the company, I left the company. We stayed in touch here and there. And I think it was almost 7 or 8 years later that I had an opportunity to hire someone. And, often we think if we step away from maternity leave, we'll be forgotten. Good people are never forgotten. And I want to emphasize that. A lot of women think that being away for a year, they won't be remembered. They can't come back into the workforce. They'll have to retrain. Oh my gosh, the skills that you learn as a parent, put those on your resume. I am so impressed when people come back after parental leave. They've learned time management. They've learned negotiation skills. They've learned to be calm in very stressful situations. So their conflict resolution is amazing. So don't deny that you have gained those skills when you come back, by the way. But, going back to the story I was telling, we, so 7 or 8 years later, I called her up, and I didn't call her up because I knew that during that 7 or 8 years, she'd been on some maternity leaves. She had worked and gained all this project management experience. No, I called her because I remembered her and her performance from 7 to 8 years ago. So when I talked about that potential, that's what I saw in her then. And oh my gosh, I was so happy that I brought her into the company, and she was working, and she's surpassed me, like, I mean, in terms of where she is, and I'm so happy for where she is in her career. And that's like, I wish we could change the narrative around maternity leave and really help women understand it's not an interference in your career. It's really not. It's actually going to help your career in the long run. It'll change you as a person. It'll define you as a person, and take that and leverage it on your resume.
Thanks so much, Rachna. I wanted to give a shout out to Laura from Edmonton, who, who reminds us that this situation also happens to women who need to take time to care for their parents as well.
Thank you.
I think that the advice still applies, right?
Absolutely. I mean, any kind of leave, any kind of, I guess what I would call it is anytime you need to step away from your day job. And the reason I say day job is because we all have to recognize that when you're stepping away, you're still stepping into a role, right? And that's why I emphasize you're learning skills in that role, whether, and thank you, whether it is, taking care of children or taking care of the elderly or another situation, but something that causes you to step away from your day job. That's where, we have to look at it differently. And, there's a lot of ways, people will bring you back when you're good. They will, interestingly enough, I think 3 of my job changes have been during maternity leave. And they were all promotions that happened during maternity leave, right? Like I came back to a better role. And again, it was because it was people who remembered the work that I did before I went on maternity.
I love that. Good people always get to where they're supposed to go. It's such a wonderful message. I did also just wanted to mention someone had put on the chat that there is a company named Mattern, Maturn, that is working towards changing the narrative on maternity leave. So if anybody has, if you have a chance, check that out and give them your support, because we definitely need that support and, to change that narrative and to normalize parental leave. Turning it back to you and asking you to get a little bit more personal, would you mind sharing with us the hardest career decision that you've had to make? And like what, how did you navigate that decision? What leadership skills do you kind of fall back on to do that?
So, I'm going to give you 2. So on the personal side, because we've just talked about, parenthood, definitely on the personal side, one of the hardest decisions for me was coming back to work full time and not turning back. I grew up in a traditional family. My mother was at home. My father was working. Very traditional, South Asian values. And when I started having children, my own mother envisioned me staying at home for the rest of my journey, right? And I think I wanted that early in my career. I think I did actually want that. I wanted to commit to all my time to just, taking care of the kids. And I have always enjoyed that aspect of my life. But, opportunities kept coming that made me turn my head and say, oh, I think I want to do that. And so to navigate through that and to really make that decision to come back to work full time, a lot of it was my support network, right? My husband, my parents, my friends, that encouragement, and knowing that I had a support network to go back to. I think it's so important as parents. We really need to build a support network. It doesn't have to be relatives. Your support network could consist of your daycare or your, the schools that your children go to, but you have to build that support network. The other, decision I'll talk about, and this one's more of a career decision, and this was hard. So, prior to coming to Kinectrics, I was with a company called Can Do Owners Group, and I was there for 5 years, but it was a phenomenal 5 years. We saw that company change. We saw the demographic there change, and I really enjoyed it. It was the kind of work where you got to integrate with the entire industry. Making the decision to leave that company was actually one of the hardest ones I've had to do. And again, navigating that, it was all about the support system. In that case, though, the support system ended up being the industry. Like I can't say how many people turned to me and were supportive of me making a career decision to leave. And, even just having my mentors say to me, it's time for me to grow somewhere else, right? Even just to hear that, it really helped.
That's wonderful to hear, and thanks for sharing the story. I've never heard that before in industry, getting behind you to help you transition to something new. It makes me proud to be part of the same industry.
Yeah, we are a family.
There's a question I always like to ask my favorite female leaders, and it's what are your top 3 leadership lessons?
Okay.
Putting you on the
So this is not going to be a surprise. My first one, be yourself. Find a leadership style that fits your personality, and don't try to change your personality to fit a leadership style. The second one I would say is that leadership is really not about the leader. A good leader is recognized by the team they shape, by the successes that their team have. And so, you think about leadership, you think about your own leadership skills, but really it's not about the leader. It's about the team they build around them. It's about the people they mentor and how those people do. It's that paying it forward. And the third one I would say is failure actually builds stronger leaders than success. And the reason I say that is because if you fail at something, it means that you've taken a risk and tried something that you knew might not be successful. Taking that risk, challenging yourself, and then understanding why it failed, it'll actually teach you a lot more than being successful ever would have. So again, failure builds stronger leaders than success.
That's, you hear that a lot, the benefits to failing, but I suppose in my experience, failure and taking risks is not really conducive to our environment that is predicated on safety. What advice would you give to young women to, I guess, overcome that hurdle, to take risks and do something that scares them?
So, there's different types of risks, right? Obviously, there's a lot of different scenarios, but I would say in the workplace, so I graduated with a chemical engineering degree, right? Am I doing chemical engineering today? No, right? So be the one who puts up your hand. Say yes to an opportunity. If you see that there's a team totally unrelated to the work that you're doing, but something that you might be interested in, and they need help, offer to help, right? Put your hand in to be a team member, put your hand in to maybe lead a small project, take the initiative to, join a committee at work, bring new ideas to it. Really don't be scared to do something that you're not comfortable with. And I said it in the presentation too, get outside your comfort zone. And that's really, when we talk about taking risks, those are risks when you're moving into something where you may not have the experience or judgment to make a good decision, right? But you need to learn somehow, and that's how you learn.
Great. There's a question on the chat that came up, and which kind of reminded me of the piece where I'd asked you to share the advice that resonated with me. But this young lady actually asks specifically for advice on how to make up for lost time on maternity leave. For getting back out there, starting over again, in a sense, building relationships. So after taking some time, and this would apply to the woman who also took time for to care for her parents, how do you make up for that lost time?
So again, I do want to change the conversation. Don't think of it as making up for the lost time. So, when you look at my resume, you're not going to see lost time, which is probably the equivalent of 4 or 5 years because of maternity leaves, right? So don't think of it as lost time. So that's the first thing. The other one is, some simple things. You do need to start to reach out to your network again, right? So as you're thinking about coming back to the workplace, start to talk to people, start to reach out again. And, again, I'm not saying reach out during maternity leave. You're going to be busy enough, right? Or when you're taking care of a parent, when you've got to focus on something else, focus there. But when you're ready to come back, take that time, get to know your network again, tell them what you've been up to, tell them, about your personal hurdles that you've had in the last little while. Be open, be yourself. I think that's part of it. And then, take advantage as you're transitioning back to reevaluate your strengths, reevaluate your passion, and ask yourself again, what do I want? Right? That's a good time to do it because you've been away from the role for so long that you'll be looking at it with fresh eyes. So I would encourage you to take that approach.
Great. I love that. Thanks for letting us revisit that. Final question from our audience. Something you'd mentioned earlier about, not chasing titles. So if we're chasing knowledge and not job titles early in our career, how do we present this on our resume if the job title doesn't represent the level of responsibility we've had? Great question.
That is a very good question. It's a good question. I think so. I remember another statistic that I've read where women only go for a job when they've got something like 100% of the requirements listed. And men will go for a job even if they've got around 60%. And that's really telling. So you have to almost take yourself away from looking at your title and really finding a way to highlight the skills and, what I do with, so now I'm getting a little technical here, but what I do with my resume, I'm diving a bit deep. I'll have the position, but right under that position, I'll have my successes, right? And I'll have those in italics right up front. And so, if you've delivered on a project, if you have managed, whether your title is manager or not, if you have had a set of, 10 direct reports reporting to you, even if your title is not manager, those are the kinds of things you do need to include those in there and put them up front, and don't put a lot of words around them. Keep it simple so that they catch the eye. Because while titles are something that, recruiting hiring managers will look at, they will also look at your bullet points. They do want to see what are your successes and what is the experience. So I think that's one way that you can offset it. Again, the other thing you'll find if you're chasing knowledge early in your career, those titles will come, whether you're expecting it or not. They just will come. You'll be given those opportunities because it's the people who have that learning mindset that they're the ones who others can see the potential in. And so you'll start to get, people coming to you and asking if you're interested in this or that, or the opportunity, you'll be able to make it yourself.
That's great. Thank you. And I think that was great advice and a wonderful question. So thank you so much to whomever asked that. We're wrapping up our chat, and I'm just wondering, Rachna, if there was any final words that you'd like to leave with us.
So I think in terms of final words, I would say when you're building relationships, be authentic, be true to yourself, and be the person that leaves the other person feeling positive about the meeting. That's really important. And finally, Susie, I really want to thank you. I want to thank all of the participants. We've had such a great engagement, wonderful questions. This was, I always learn a lot from these experiences myself. And so I thank you all for that and for allowing me to learn today as well from all of you. So thank you, Susie, and thank you to Women in Leadership.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm just going to wrap it up with one more. So thank you to everyone who joined us today for our speaker series, and for my Women in Leadership Ottawa team for making all of our helping support the chapter and all of its incredible content. We would love to hear back from the audience. So you will be sent a post-event survey. Please complete it and let us know how we could do better, or if there's anything else you would like us to speak about, and stay connected through our social media and our website. We have some great events coming up down the pipe. We have our Indigenous Women's Leadership Forum. It's March 30th, and registrations are still open. as well as our Saskatchewan chapter is presenting how leaders can influence corporate culture with Carrie, the chapter chair. And Toronto is hosting a partner speaker series with Shiseido. And I hope that if you're interested, you will go onto the website and register. Oh, one more event. Sorry about that. Saskatchewan is also hiring Building Your Network and getting inspired. And with that, I'd like to end and wish everybody a wonderful afternoon and wonderful weekend. Bye now.